Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Compliance Chronicles. Today it's just me and Ray, no guests for a change, which we're looking forward to. And today we're talking about a topic which is it's a good one for people in the world of compliance, but especially in the gambling industry where there's so much at stake. We're going to be talking about overcoming mistakes, why some people struggle with overcoming mistakes, the treatment of members of staff, your colleagues when mistakes are made. So I'm going to start straight with a question for you then, Ray. Why is it so difficult to overcome mistakes?
Hey Alex, before we start, we always do our pleasantries, and so I'm going to make sure we do make our guests aware that we would love them to continue engaging with us. So thank you guys so far who have been engaging, subscribing, commenting, liking and sharing our content. We just continue to ask you to plug in, share, like, subscribe, and turn your notification bells on. And if you are having any issues with notifications, let us know, and we'll get straight onto the relevant media or platforms that we provide the podcast for.
So there you go. I just made a mistake. I forgot to include that. But we've overcome it.
Yeah, no. Look, I really, like you said, this is an episode we're doing together. One that's probably first for good few episodes now, where it's just been myself and yourself. And I like it actually because it kind of gives us the opportunity to kind of be a bit drier in our jokes and our content and stuff that we say, rather than when we have a guest here. Yeah. But going back to your question is like around mistakes. I think this is a really good episode because mistakes are something everybody makes every day, and you make a mistake every day. It might be a small mistake, it might be a bigger mistake, and I think the overcoming of the mistake is, like you're saying, is something that often is such a challenge. So I think you're delving into why that is, the impact, and also the most important thing, steps that can be taken to overcome these mistakes is very, very important for us personally in our careers, and also, like you said, in compliance. So in the wider compliance aspect, mistakes often are heightened, have a bigger impact. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like a mistake made in compliance probably has the biggest consequence potentially when it comes to a department in the business organization. So I think that's really important as well, just to discuss and seeing how we can navigate that. So go back to your question, I think it's like multi-layered. Mistakes are really difficult often because of the way it makes people feel. So the psychological aspect of it, I think people feel their reputation might be damaged. People actually may feel that they are a lesser person, so they might feel shame, guilt in the mistake they've made. And I think that's often why mistakes are such a difficult thing for people to accept and then deal with.
But then is that a problem with the individual that's made the mistake, or is that a problem with the company culture that's made them feel they can't admit it?
That's a good question, really good question. And I'm the stats man, right? So I think there's a stat from the Career Builder which said 92% of compliance professionals have felt they've made a mistake in their job, which could have limited their career, or they feared was career limiting. But on the flip side, there was another research from the Google published research, which said that 76% of professionals feel that if they're in a safer environment where they have job security, they are more likely to own up to a mistake and take immediate action on a mistake. So you have that one step is actually personal, but the actual second point is that actually, yes, the organizational and cultural environment of a business would impact on how people deal with mistakes. So I think it's both, like you said. I think it's the person and the organization.
Well, so talking of Google then, because obviously when it comes to businesses that have set almost a gold standard, set the bar quite high. Seeing as you've read Google stats, about Google's Project Aristotle.
Well, I'm not.
I think it's probably the same thing as what you refer to. So
yes, it was actually. It was Aristotle.
So their Project Aristotle was a study on. They wanted to study throughout the entire group, throughout their entire company, the high performing teams. What's separating the high performing teams from the not so high performing teams, and what they found from their study was the number one characteristic, or the number one trait was safety what was the word they used? Psychological safety. Sorry, was psychological safety. And when they dive deeper when you read the study, the psychological safety came from their feeling that they could open up about mistakes and not be reprimanded, led to them having psychological safety, which led to them being the highest performing teams. So that Google study, for me, I think that should be shared throughout businesses worldwide to say, look, you want your teams to perform well, let them know that it's perfect's not expected. We're not expecting perfect. And I think coming back to the point you were saying early on, or one of us said earlier on about, compliance professionals, I think there is an expectation in businesses that within compliance teams, we cannot make mistakes. We're the gatekeepers. We're the ones that are meant to find mistakes. We're the ones that are meant to prevent mistakes. How can we be making mistakes? And I think that is part of the problem, is that we inherit that mentality of we're compliance. We're in this part of the business that's got to protect the business and employees. There's no way I can make a mistake, but we do. And I think the problem that I've seen throughout my career has always come from bad management and bad culture. That has what's caused it. And I've made it my mission that whenever I start in a company, that if that culture isn't good, that's one of the first things I try to do. And I normally do it by just opening up about mistakes I've made.
Yeah.
And I think that works. Hopefully it works. Yeah. Either that or they just think I'm highly incompetent.
No, I think that's one of the points that kind of we'll go through and talk about when we talk about how to overcome a mistake or how to build a culture. I think one of the good key things is that building that vulnerability as a leader. But then talk me through that. You're kind of building that from a psychological aspect. When you see things that you're trying to change and make the environment better, how do you do that from a psychological aspect with the people you're working with?
I think, again, coming back to that Google study, I think one of the things I would like to believe that I do is I make people feel safe. I think within the teams that I work with, both my leaders and the people that are within my team, I try to make everyone feel like it's a safe environment. I would much rather know you've made a mistake than find out later on that you've hidden a mistake. Yeah. Like if you come to me, no matter how big it is, no matter how huge the issue is, we can work together to find a solution. But if I don't know you've made a mistake, then that's where there's a problem. And I will always open up to my team when I've made mistakes. I make tons of mistakes. And I think the reason I've progressed well in my career and I think I've become a fairly good leader within teams is because I've made so many mistakes. And I think that I learn from them. Like people say, look, it's okay to make a mistake, just don't repeat it. Yeah. But sometimes you do repeat mistakes. I mean, ask my wife, the amount of times she'll ask me to do something and I've forgotten to do it. That's a mistake. I'll probably forget the next week as well to do that same thing. It's bad, but we do it as humans. We do repeat mistakes. And I just try to create a culture within teams that it's fine. You can make mistakes, but you've got to be open about it so we can fix it and learn from it. And I still see a lot of bad leaders now who don't have that within their teams. And I think, I know I'm giving a really long answer, but I would say that I've learned a lot from bad managers and the way they've treated mistakes. And that's been equally important in my career as learning from my own mistakes. Yeah.
I think there's a saying that says that mistakes, let me go again. Mistakes aren't the end. They're a signal of there being something to learn. So mistakes aren't the end. They're a signal that there is something for you to learn. So I think if everybody understands that, like, actually, this is a mistake, but actually there's something to learn from this rather than this is a mistake, this is the end, that kind of flips the psychology of it. And I think that's what you're saying. The psychology that is created not only internally by the person, but the psychology that's created by the organisation, whereas you cannot make a mistake, is what, I guess, drives that spiral effect of actually once this happens. Yeah.
I worked in a company where one of the very, very senior leaders of the company came across really nice most of the time. But if he found out a mistake had happened, he would publicly embarrass that person. So let's say, I don't know, somebody's forgot to do a certain task. An email would go out. There'd be an email chain, almost like a war room, but it'd be so-and-so forgot to do this and this resulted in this issue. this senior leader within that email chain with so many people in the company included in it would say, why did you forget to do this? You know, are you an idiot type scenario? Make it really belittling that person. And it was like he was trying to prevent future mistakes from happening through fear, as opposed to, you know, putting your arm around that guy, that person, and saying, don't worry about it. It's a mistake. Look, try not to do it again. Let's find out how that mistake happened, why it happened, and prevent it.
Yeah.
His solution was, I'm going to really embarrass this guy, and then hopefully nobody ever makes a mistake again.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen.
Yeah.
All that happened is the mistakes were happening, just nobody wanted to let you know because they didn't want you to embarrass them.
Yeah. Yeah. So now the mistakes are hidden, and that compounds them.
It's worse.
Yeah.
Like I think I can't remember who said it or where I read it, but someone was saying that within compliance, you very rarely have serious issues through human error or through system error. It's usually based on the response. It's usually the response. So you can have a process that fails, a system that fails, your technology fails. It can happen. You're not normally going to get in a ton of trouble, depending on the severity of it. You're not normally going to get in a ton of trouble based on that particular incident. But if your response isn't quick, it's not swift, and it's not effective, that is usually where you have issues. Like if you take a data leak, for example, you know, if a data leak has occurred and you've not spotted it quickly, and then that data has now become, you know, international, and it's being used by criminals, and then you haven't prevented it from happening again the second time. That's the problem. Not the fact that the data leak happened. Don't get me wrong, that is an issue, but your response is everything. And I think that's what we as leaders need to be able to do, is that when somebody's made a mistake or an issue has occurred, is that we respond in a way that lets them know it's all right, but let's try to find a way to make sure it doesn't repeat itself.
So just before, like, we kind of go into maybe talk a bit more about kind of specifically in compliance, just on that, because from my side, what I try to do is build that psychological safety by opening up very early to anybody that joins an organization or anybody that I work with. That is, I want you to challenge me. I want you to tell me that there's things that could be done better, or there's a process that doesn't work efficiently. So essentially, a mistake, because, you know, things that can be done better can potentially be a mistake. How do you then try to build the person's psychology and strength in kind of their ability to deal with mistakes?
You answer that. How do you do it?
So, like I said, I will say to people, it's not about the problem, it's about the solution. So I will say, whenever there is something that goes wrong, I'm not as concerned with that. I'm more concerned with what's the solution. So then it tries to shift the person from being in a spin and focusing on the problem. And again, going back to what we've been saying in the loads of episodes, is that being solution oriented, being a problem solver. And for me, that then helps build the psychology, and that actually the weight of the issue is not on the mistake. The weight of the issue is on the solution.
But how do you, because you said you do that early on, like at onboarding stage.
Yeah.
So how do you do that at onboarding? How do you create that culture right from the beginning?
Yeah. So like if we're talking about specifically about employees and organizations, so I'll have an intro and onboarding call, or hopefully I like to do it face to face where possible. Have a conversation with the person, try to understand their character, and then again deliver the message that this is a transparent. So this is a transparent environment where it's very okay that we find things that could be done better.
It's very okay.
It's very okay. It's okay. Not very okay. It's okay. Or it's very normal. Very normal that we find things that can be done better. And it's very normal that there are things that may be a mistake or low level. So somebody might forget something in a review, or forgets to file something somewhere. That's very normal. So it's about finding a better way to do it in the future, which minimizes that potential mistake happen again. And that should always be the focus. So I'm like, I know that the things I do are not the best. I know that I make mistakes. So if you're seeing this, please call me out. And
can I just ask a question on that? So, but you've got an employee that's come in.
Yeah.
You're onboarding them and you're doing this face to face, and you're saying all the right things, but they've just come from a business where they've been at 2-3 years, whatever, 6 months, whatever. And in that business, it was the opposite culture. You couldn't go to your MLRO, your head of AML, and say, look, Ray, I messed up. That source of wealth request I was meant to make for that guy, I didn't make it, and now they've gone on to spend £1 million in this week or whatever. They've come from a business. Hopefully, it never happens, but they've come from a business where you can't have those conversations. You're trying to change what they've learned in the last, say, 2 years, 5 years, whatever. You're trying to change that in that face-to-face meeting. I don't think that works.
So it's not something that would change in that meeting, but it will, like I said, it provides that psychological safety in terms of it gives them the ability to have an environment which they're more likely to. So, and then over time, hopefully they don't do it on day one. So hopefully it's not day one where they forget to send this request. So over time, when they build those experiences where they've are mistakes. So throughout the training, they might have a training and onboarding stage. By the time they get to really being embedded in the processes, systems, and in the operations, the aim is that they would have got to that point where actually they've unlearned the negatives of actually a mistake means the end. A mistake means shame and guilt. To actually mistake means what can we learn? What can I learn from here? What is their solution? What's the solution? And so it's worked. It's worked well, very well. If I'm honest, like you said, there are times where people, especially when you're working with different employees from different cultures of different countries, they have a different. So it's not just the psychology of the person, the psychology of the company, it's psychology of the culture. So based on different countries, different cultures, mistakes are seen differently as well. So you have to then navigate how in some cultures mistakes are seen compared to others, and then deal with that there. So you just have to you have to really understand the person, and that's what I try to do.
And then after the infancy of somebody joining the business, if a mistake occurs, let's say while someone's in their role, how do you handle that in a way that you think is continuing that psychological safety?
Yeah, so if a mistake happens, I always go to the person first, or even if the mistake happens and we identify that in a open forum, so there might be an internal audit or there might be like a meeting, and the focus is not the mistake. The focus is actually what should have happened here. So, it's a mistake, and then we go back to the beginning. Okay, take me back. Let's go back to the beginning. What should have happened here? Where did it break down? So we go back to the beginning. Okay, this is what should happen. This is what should have been the case, and then this is where the mistake happened. Okay, so what caused it? Okay, this. The focus is straight away with everyone is that what can we do now to ensure that this mistake doesn't happen again. So it's not like, you made a mistake, what are you going to do about it? It's about actually let's go back and find out the steps of how it came about, and then what we can do together, collectively, if it's an open forum. And again, that person, what could have been done, or what would you suggest in the future to stop the mistake rather than the repercussions of your mistake straight away. Then after that, we will analyze, okay, what is the impact of this mistake? So the priority, again, always is the solution, and then we focus on the impact.
Okay.
Rather than impact and then solution.
And then, what do you do when it's you that makes a mistake? Like, what's your response essentially?
Again, it's for me. I have something that I kind of keep as well. It's like a mistake journal. So like when I make a mistake, I log it down, and again, my focus is the solution. And if there's anybody else impacted, I will let them know. So I'm very vulnerable in that. So I've made this mistake, so that I can get others involved to actually help a solution. So often I can find a solution myself, but when you collaborate, more often than not, the solution is actually a better solution than the one potentially you can come up on your own, because you have other people invested, other people giving input into that solution. So that's what I do. I log the mistake. I'm open in terms of I let people who are impacted know about the mistake, and then I also obviously have my own solution and say that this is the solution I have from the mistake, and then I get people on board, invested to actually let me know actually is this the best way to solve the mistake or prevent the mistake from happening, or are there better ways that we can find to in future ensure that as much as possible this doesn't happen again. And then obviously dealing with the impact of the mistake is, look, how can we mitigate the impact that's happened?
So what do you think separates people that overcome mistakes to the ones that don't, from the ones that don't?
I think there's again the twofold. I think it's how you internalize a mistake. What does a mistake mean to you? So I think that's one of the key differences is the person, and we kind of focus a lot on this because I guess this part of the episode, because I guess this is probably probably the key factor in overcoming mistakes is the person. How does a person view a mistake? And if you take it back to like a football, like we often use like sports, but if you take it back to like a sporting environment, like one of the key differences between a world-class footballer and a good footballer is the psychological aspect. It's how they deal with mistakes. So a world-class footballer will not be fazed by a mistake. They'll see a mistake as a learning, whereas potentially a good footballer will see a mistake as actually, I won't take that shot again next time that's in that same position. The world-class footballer will say, I took a mistake, I took a shot last time in this position and it went wrong, so I'm going to adjust and take a shot again with the adjustments I've made. And that's exactly what I think the difference is that...
I mean, isn't there a Michael Jordan saying? It's
know.
like, I can't remember. He didn't become good at free throws because he made 10,000 amazing shots. He became good at free throws because he'd missed 10,000 times and carried on. It's I've probably worded that terribly, but it's something along those lines. Is that the reason he became so good essentially was because I screwed up 10,000 times. Yeah. So now I know when the time comes for me to make, game 6, I've got to make a 3-pointer. He has the confidence to do it because he's practiced it and missed 10,000 times, so he's ready.
So I think that's the key differential, is that the mistake doesn't make the person feel any less about themselves, whereas some people, a mistake will make them feel less confident about themselves, and then if that's the case, then it spirals down in terms of their ability to overcome. Your
confidence is going to get knocked if you make a mistake. Even if you are forthcoming about it, your confidence is going to get knocked.
Your confidence, but your confidence may get a knock, but your feeling in in yourself is actually you're no less of a person, you're no less competent. You make a mistake, you get a confidence knock, but it doesn't mean you're any less of a footballer if we go back again.
But how is that? How can you reaffirm that in the individual? Like, let's say, for example, I'm managing an AML officer. She's made a mistake, whatever it is. There's an error that's occurred. But she's reacted well. Yeah. She's done everything that you said there. However, how can I help her? How can I understand and help that person to make sure that their confidence hasn't taken an internal knock, so that even though on the outside she's saying the right things, but deep down inside, like we all do, whenever something goes wrong, some of us are good at putting on a face, but inside we're kicking ourselves like, oh my God, I don't know why that happened. Is there a way for those individuals that we can give that confidence a boost?
Yeah. So something I try to do is actually query them, and oftentimes the mistake they've made is something they've done again 10 times before that without the mistake. So I'll query them around, you've done this before, you've showed this skill, you showed this level of competence, you did this really, really well. How were you able to do that? So then it's questioning on them how they were able to do something good. Then they will find the factors that contribute to them doing this thing really, really well. And it's like, okay, how can we take that into this scenario where you didn't do this really well, and then implement it there so that the next time you do that really, really well again. So that's how I try to focus, kind of building that internal confidence even when a mistake's there has been made.
So, talking about people that overcome mistakes in comparison to those that don't. When we were preparing for this, I think it was last week, I want to sound like such a nerd, but basically I went through all the managers that I've had in the last, let's say, 15, 20 years. And I put it in a table, and I put the managers on there, and I had great managers and I had terrible managers like we all have. And I put a list of things that they've done really well, in my opinion, obviously it's just my opinion, that they've done really well in terms of either being, what the strengths that they had when it came to mistakes and their weaknesses. And I put it all in a table, and I wrote some of them down in terms of what I felt, and I included me in there as a manager as well, like things that I've done wrong and that I think I've done well, in terms of what I think separated the people that were good at overcoming mistakes and not, but also, more importantly, the ones that were good at creating a culture where it allowed for employees to overcome mistakes. And what I put here, so the number one thing is the difference between them was ownership versus avoidance. This was what came clear when I went through it all.
Yeah.
Was ownership versus avoidance. So all of the ones that were good with mistakes, they were, whenever a mistake occurred, either them as individuals or people that they were managing, they tackled it head on. So they approached the mistake, and essentially they had the mindset of, okay, now this has happened, either them or the team. This has happened. This is what went wrong. This is what we're going to do to fix it. And then there was one manager, and they're terrible, and I won't hold back. They were a deflector. When anything went wrong, it's the process, it's the people, it's the circumstances, it's the environment, it's the economy. I've stubbed my toe this morning. Every time they made a mistake as an individual or the team had an issue, there was no accountability. There was no self-reflection. It was always deflecting it away. And what was even worse was that when they themselves were making mistakes, they would sometimes throw people under the bus. And that, for me, was like the worst characteristic. And then the second part was, it kind of links into it, was reflection versus repetition. So the overcomers, and I used you in this example, and I think it comes on to what you were saying there, is they reflect, they investigate, and then they adapt. That was like the key thing. And I put you in that category. And then the non-learners essentially repeat the same error in different clothes. So they will repeat it. Might be slightly different, but they repeat the same error. And the main reason for it, what I came to, is the main reason they were repeating the error is because they never stopped to ask why. Why did that occur? And then because they never asked the why, it never started the other steps of, well, how did that occur? And then how can I make sure it doesn't occur again? So I put that table together. But it was funny as I was going through it with me in there, you in there, and they were good and bad for us two as well. But it was really funny as I was going through it. I was like, I've made so many mistakes, like so many, and I was going through them all thinking, there was some that I thought I'd learnt from them, but then as I went 4 years down in my career, it's like, oh my God, I've done something similar to that, nearly 4 years later. So it was just funny as I was going through the table.
And I think going all the way back, actually, a step back, and I think this is something I was going to say, I had in my head to say, and then we started having the conversation, I forgot, but it's come back now, is one of the reasons why people struggle to accept mistakes and may deflect, because that's when it came back when you talked about deflection, or struggle to overcome them or deal with them, is because they haven't actually assessed whether it's a mistake or not. So I think the most important step is actually, as well, is actually if a mistake has happened, or somebody says a mistake has happened, or somebody reveals a mistake, is it actually a mistake? So if you to be able to accept it, is a mistake. Analyze actually, is it a mistake, or is it an alternative or solution or way of getting to arriving at something that needed to be done? Or is it just a different interpretation? So, for example, if we are going to a shop down the road, it's at the end of the straight road, but then you go straight and I take the first right, then take the second left, and then still get to the shop. Is it a mistake? I've still arrived at the destination. I've just taken a different route. So it might not be the most efficient route, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a mistake. So I think when people analyze, actually, yes, I have made a mistake. So if you went to the shop,
it's still a mistake.
Yeah, no.
So if I said to you, Ray, we're going to that shop at the end of the road, Ray, I'm telling you, this is my instruction to you, just drive straight. But then you go right.
No, but you're not going to say, if you just said drive straight, but oftentimes the aim is, we need to do this. You won't say, you're very rarely told, this is the way to do it. I mean, you might have a template, but very rarely someone's going to tell you all the steps. Okay. And if you're getting told all the steps, then you're not really,
but either way,
there's no value in that.
I still think that's a mistake. I think your mindset and the character that you are, and it's a really good thing, is that I've made a mistake, but I've adapted quickly. I've realised I've made a mistake, but I'm going to find another way of getting there. And it could have been better. You could have gone that way and you've passed, a forest with unicorns and it's a much better view. And it's like, oh, I wish I'd have gone that way as well. It could have turned out for the better. But I do think a mistake has happened. It's just the reaction is different.
I think, for me, a mistake is only when you're unable to get to the desired outcome.
No, I disagree with that. What do you mean?
So let's say,
if you make a mistake, it's only because you haven't achieved what you set out to achieve. But you can make a mistake and still set out to achieve what you wanted to achieve.
I mean, yes and no. So I feel like when you're talking about overcoming mistakes, if someone asks you to do X and you're able to do X, but at that point you did something else in that process that potentially wasn't efficient in getting to X, I think that's not a mistake in the sense that you haven't got to X. It's a mistake in the sense that you haven't done it the most efficient way. So I think you have to determine actually, is it a mistake for what is being presented to you? Is it a mistake? You were told to go to this shop here. You've arrived at this shop. Is it a mistake? You were there. No, the mistake is that you went right instead of going straight. So actually, it's about, again, understanding. But the thing is, then that's when people will be able to own it, because they'll be like, actually, yes, I did go right. That was a mistake to go right, but I've still come to the shop. So there's less pressure on accepting the full failure of actually I didn't go to the shop, and then because they've understood actually where the mistake is, there's a lot more acceptance of actually I had made a mistake, and it reduces the magnitude of the mistake, because they've understood actually where the mistake is.
Yeah, whereas I suppose a deflector would say, "Oh no, I meant to go right. I wanted to go right because I wanted to see something."
Yeah.
A deflector would come up with an excuse or reason. Okay, yeah. I still don't fully agree. My understanding, and probably I should have researched the definition, but my understanding of making a mistake is that if you've been given an instruction or an intention to do something, and then you've made an error that has resulted in you either not achieving that, or taking longer, or taking an alternative route, that's a mistake. For example, if you said to me, Alex...
Research it now, because I don't think...
What the definition of a mistake?
Yeah, let's do it now.
We should probably have done it. Yeah. Go on, you do it while I'm talking.
Go on.
But what was I trying to say now? But yeah, so when you make... what was I saying?
So you were saying that you believe the mistake is actually...
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So for example, if you say to me, Alex, I'm trying to get documents from... this customer, source of wealth documents from this customer, and I want you to contact that customer and get documents. However, I don't have his details, but I know somebody that knows him. I make a mistake. I contact his friend and say, look, Alan, I need his source of wealth documents. Can you ask him to send me a bank statement? And he sends it in. So I've still got the end result. He sent in his bank statements. He sent in his source of wealth documents, but I've done it a different way. I made a mistake. I didn't contact him. I contacted his friend. So the result's okay. I may have breached data protection. I may have breached, tipping off, for example. But the result's still the same. I've got what you wanted me to get, but I've made a mistake. So that's my understanding of a mistake, is that you have a pathway, you have an intention, you have a route that you're meant to go down, and you deviate from it unintentionally. Are you Googling it?
It's taken me ages. The signal is terrible here. I'm trying to Google it.
Anyway, that's my interpretation.
Yeah, so I think, but that's a different mistake to what what's been assigned to you. So you can accept that. Yeah, there was a mistake that you went to the customer, but then what happens there is that the actual intention was that, well, I want to get these documents, and I've got these documents. So then there can be recognition that you've actually the intent. There wasn't. You can the intention is important as well. So the intention there clearly is that you were trying to achieve the aim. And once everyone accepts that actually your intention wasn't to make the mistake, that person can actually accept the mistake a lot easier as well. So obviously it's not good that you ask the customer's friend, but everybody can see that actually the person was trying to get the documents or get whatever they was asking for, and then you can focus on actually this element of what you did was a mistake, and then again that allows people just to act quicker.
Do you think in the world that you work in, so let's focus on anti-money laundering, do you think that because the stakes are so high, do you think there's a fear within the teams that you manage and the companies that you work with, that there's a fear of them making a mistake and the impact it could have?
Yeah, so I think if we move on to kind of just compliance in general and the way and the compliance fallout when it comes to mistakes, and kind of why mistakes so much more feared in compliance. I think you already said it at the start. I think yes. I think there's a lot of kind of fear on the impact. So one of the things I do in my kind of my training that I deliver is that I will always deliver kind of the positive outcome. So yes, we'll cover this is the impact of a mistake if you don't do something right. But if you do something right and the focus is actually on doing the intention of doing something right, this is the greater impact. So there's never a massive focus on actually the mistake of not getting things wrong. The focus is on actually how to get it right. So when people are focusing more often on how to get things right, there's less of a likelihood for them to get it wrong, if that makes sense. So if somebody's just going through a kind of a process and is really just, okay, I don't want to get this wrong, they're not their brains are opened up to all the options of actually how to do this really well and get it right. They're just really trying to focus on like the micro elements of that task, and then it removes the creative element, it removes that kind of critical thinking, and actually it makes it actually then more likely to make a mistake. So
Yeah, so we've worked together a long time, and I think one of the things that we do well is we call each other out when we do something wrong. It can be error, mistake, or it could just be bad judgment. But we call each other out, and I think we create that within our teams. But from what you're saying there, I've seen you manage teams, and I'm going to disagree. I'm not disagree, but
yeah.
I'm going to question it a little bit. I've seen teams that you manage or that you've worked with that you hold them to a very, very high standard. Do you think holding them to that high standard is subconsciously putting installing the fear of error?
I do hold them to a high standard, but one thing I do always do is only hold them to a standard I believe they can achieve. So I will always assess somebody, assess the competence, assess where they are in their development stage, where they are in their career path, and I will strive for them to reach the top, the maximum they can achieve, I believe they can achieve based on that. So there's a high standard, but I will never have everybody at the same. There'll be a base standard, if that makes sense. Everyone has to achieve this standard, which is the bare minimum, which is again be conscious in what you're doing, be open, be looking to ways to improve, be a learner. So actually focus on learning, but like really take interest and care in actually what you're doing. Other than that, that's everything above that is kind of like based on each individual, and I'll set the standard based on that, and so it just drives them. So if they fall below that, they will still be a high standard, and they'll always be above the minimum standard. So again, that's where I kind of try to.
But I've seen.
It's
going to sound like I'm calling you up.
Go on.
So let's use an example. I've seen your standards, and I love the fact there's high standards. But I've seen your standards hold people accountable for human error.
Yeah, I think everybody should be held accountable.
But okay, let me word that a little bit differently then. So I've seen your high standards hold them accountable for human error that could possibly put a fear of repeating, having that same error occur again, that has led them to taking so much time on reviewing a customer that the consequence of that has been, they've stopped making mistakes. However, now I'll give them, 10 customers to take a look at that would usually take them an hour, for example, but it's taken them 5 hours because they're worried of repeating that mistake again because they don't want to let you down because your standards are so high.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think what happens is people might want to do things in the way that I do it. And I've been doing things a certain way for nearly 20 years now. So my ability to do it is almost second nature. But I will always take people through. So for example, using that example, before I give anybody a task or give an expectation, I will, as much as I can, talk them through the task visually. So I will go through the task with them. I will, if it's a kind of a smaller task, I'll replicate what I would like with that task. I will design it. I will do as like a really mini draft of what I'm looking for as a task or as an action. I will explain kind of my logic and my rationale behind that, and I'll let them go away. And if they come back, and obviously, like you're saying, if they how does it take them 3 days? I'd say, hold on a second. I wasn't expecting to take 3 days. Why is it taking 3 days? I didn't want to, disappoint you in what was delivered. then I'll go through what they've done in that task, and then I say, look, I would expect this would take me 3 hours. For you, maybe a day. So let's talk about if there's another task like this in the future, how we can reduce the time it takes and the expectations I set. So maybe in the first time round, that person might take an hour for a specific task because of the standard I've set. But once that task is completed, there will always be an analysis, an evaluation of, is it completed into the standard? How long did it take? And then we'll kind of do a debrief of how we can either improve the quality if needed to, or reduce the time, for example, it's taken, if that's another aspect of consideration. So that's how I do it. I don't just leave people to kind of like continuously take 3 hours. And that's another thing, like I said, I don't want people to be spending their time in fear. That's the worst thing, because I want people to be consistently having brain power to actually think of ways to do things better. And the only way you do that is by being assured in yourself that you know you're doing it right in the first place. If you're not sure you're not doing it right, you're never going to question, well, how can we done better? But if you're sure that you're doing it right and you're competent in what you're doing, you can always then look at ways for things to be done better.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So the definition of of a mistake.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah,
ready.
I had it here. So I think it's a kind of a balance of what we've been discussing. So definition of mistake is an action, decision, or judgment that is incorrect, misguided, or unintentional, often resulting from a lack of understanding, oversight, or lack of knowledge. So I think the action or a judgment is the point where they're potentially taking the right left turn.
Yeah, so it's the reaction.
Yeah.
And it's adapting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the aspects of that is when the outcome leads to where the misjudgment leads to somebody having the wrong outcome. So choosing the wrong route on a map is the mistake, but actually the destination still is the right one. So you've made a mistake in the way you've gone, but you still arrived at the right destination. So I think it reduces the magnitude of the mistake. If you're saying, well, I've arrived at this destination, but I've taken 3 hours instead of 2 hours, you can accept, yeah, I've taken 3 hours.
I mean, I don't know, I think you've got to be conscious of the message you're sending in saying that. I worry about that. I worry about somebody listening to this, and let's say, you work in a big company, right? We work in big companies. And you get somebody in one of the teams that says, yeah, look, I didn't do it the way your policy and procedure said it, right? I didn't do it that way. I done it a different way. It was a mistake, but I got it done. I think you're opening a door to people deviating from policies and procedures.
Yeah, I mean, it's unintentional. So the main thing is that when it's unintentional. So the focus, it's not a case of there's not a mistake, but I guess again, it's going back to actually how you're presenting that mistake and how they're able to accept it. If you said, look, you did a mistake and everything's the end of the world, actually it isn't the end of the world. Yes, you deviate from the process. Again, go back to why did you do it this way? And so we can just focus on that one element rather than focusing on, we've got this documents now, we can't use the documents. And it's like, okay, this element of it was wrong. How do we focus on that one? So it's not advocating for people to go and deviate from the process. It's just for them to be able to accept, again, going back to kind of taking accountability, is that the quicker you can accept the mistake, the quicker you can find a resolution. The problem is when you just focus on all aspects of a task or a project or whatever went wrong, and not focus on the key aspect of that thing that went wrong that caused the mistake, you're then spending so much time actually deciding actually who else is involved, who else can be blamed, who else made mistakes. It's just like, okay, I made that mistake. That was me.
So give me an example. What's a mistake that you've made then, as a leader, as a manager? What's a mistake that you've made that you've learned from, and now you've put something in place that avoids that from happening again?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably loads of them.
But one that our listeners could maybe associate with and learn from.
For example, I mean, I can use an example which is slightly recent, where I had somebody else, an employee, very valued employee, had discussions about career progression, and I'd had a meeting with them, and I'd agreed that I would push for their promotion. I would send a business case to members of senior management, the board, ownership, to advocate for promotion, etc. We agreed that. I made a mistake or I forgot to send the email. So it came about that the person then got offered another role, to end up taking the role. Um, Obviously, had a meeting with them and finding out kind of, what happened and why, and why they weren't accepting the offer that, I was going to propose to the board. And they were like, well, you never send this email. Obviously, I was a bit surprised. I went back and I hadn't sent the email. So I accepted that. So straight away, I accepted that. First things first, I accepted that. Second thing, I went straight to the board and said, I've made this mistake. I've forgot to send this email. So it wasn't the case of just trying to hide it. I hadn't sent this email. Could it be considered? And if so, could we expedite it? The impact at the moment is person potentially leaving. Long story short, the person still ended up leaving because the offer was a good offer. But that was a mistake on my part. What I've done since then is that anytime I have discussions now where I state I'm going to send an email, I will also ask for buy-in or dual accountability. Where I'm like, I'm going to send you this email today, tomorrow, next week. If I don't send it by this time, please chase me on it. Please come back to me, so that it helps build the accountability or build the responsibility of actually everybody being aligned actually in this email. So the mistake meant that somebody left, but I've learned from that. And since then, there has been occasions where, like, I've said I'm going to send an email, and naturally we might forget. I'll put a reminder in my calendar. I'll put a reminder in my kind of to-do list. Over time, you still may forget, and so what's happened is that people feel okay now to kind of remind you. They might have thought, this person was not didn't want to do it. They might have thought that I didn't want to no longer kind of proceed with that suggestion or that agreement, but it wasn't the case. I merely forgot. I merely had misunderstood myself. I thought I had, and I hadn't.
I remember that scenario.
Yeah.
And I think I like that example because it's good, because it's the perfect example of the two different types of people, those that learn from mistakes and those that don't. Because in your example, what you've done there is perfect. So you made the mistake, or you made one of the mistakes, and you've reflected on it, you've made changes, and you've adapted. But there were other people involved in that scenario that also made mistakes. So there were senior managers that were aware that promotion was meant to be offered and was meant to take place. But when it all went wrong and the person was leaving, you put your hands up and said, yeah, you know what? I should have done this. And you learned from it, made changes. But the senior manager deflected, came to me and said, Ray forgot to do this. Now we're losing this valuable employee. Oh, how did this happen? Where they were equally accountable because they'd also made human error, because they were aware that it was meant to be offered. They didn't come to you, didn't come to me, didn't go to the person and say, what's the progress on this? So they had responsibility as well, and they weren't accountable. Me in that situation, I didn't, until now you're saying it, I knew that you were meant to offer that person the promotion because you discussed it with me. I didn't follow up with you. I don't remember following up with you. I don't think I did. So there are other people that are accountable as well. But I think your reaction was the best one because you've learned from it and adapted. But like I say, the senior manager and even me until this point hadn't reflected on it to see, well, was I meant to do something in that situation and what didn't I do? So that's a really good example.
Yeah, I mean, I was responsible for sending the email, but most people were accountable for ensuring that this could have got through. But at the end of the day, you still have accountability. So I think one thing that sometimes people try to do is presume that only one person can be held accountable, or but many people can be accountable for a single mistake or a single thing not going right. It's not essentially one person. So I think
I think we're good. I know this is going to sound, I hope it doesn't sound wrong, but I think we're good at creating that culture. Yeah. I think we for people listening, I think it's important that, I suppose the key message is you shouldn't ever fear getting something wrong. You should fear being in a culture where no one tells you that you are wrong.
Yeah.
I think that's a really key message, is that one thing that you and I have always done, and the teams that we're in, no matter how senior or junior someone appears, is I believe there's a platform and an environment where somebody could come to me and say, Alex, you do it a lot. Yeah. Alex, I don't agree with this, or that was wrong, or that was a mistake. You should have done it differently. And I think we create that culture where that's okay. And I think that's, I suppose, the key message is that doesn't matter if you get something wrong, but it does matter if you're in a culture where getting something wrong isn't accepted and allowed and part of the culture.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I strongly believe that good collaboration, good development is based on people coming together and disagreeing rather than agreeing. So they start off in a place of disagreement, and based on that disagreement, they find an outcome and a solution which actually is better than probably potentially what both people had or everyone had in the first instance. So I strongly believe that. So, and I think that feeds into kind of mistakes and feeds into kind of overcoming it and kind of always being that solution orientated mindset. So I'm just conscious of the time. We just kind of had a chat on the soapbox here. So I wanted to kind of make sure we cover rebuilding trust, especially from a compliance perspective, rebuilding trust in your team, or for example, really, really important for companies and compliance departments, how they can rebuild trust, whether, if they've had some sort of mistake which caused any sort of regulatory failing or regulatory action, how they can rebuild trust internally, but also with the external partners, with the regulators. So first of all, what are the kind of common mistakes you think that kind of happen in the compliance space? What are the common mistakes?
In the compliance space?
Yeah.
I think, oh God, I would say number one.
Or that cause compliance failings.
That cause compliance. Number one, I believe, top of the list would be the fact that in compliance, there's an expectation on ourselves and from the wider business that you're going to be perfect, that compliance doesn't make mistakes. And perfection in compliance is an illusion. Yeah, that number one. And I think being all the things that we've said today, being vulnerable, being open, transparent, all of those things within the culture, in the business, within a business, it is key. That's number one. And I would say a way of doing that, or a way that I found useful, is a company that I worked with, I won't say who it is, have a newsletter that goes out every month, and it goes out to all of the staff. And we publish it from the compliance department. We publish errors. So it's going to sound crazy, but let's say you're in my team, you've made an error this week. I'm not going to put your name, by the way, but you made an error this week for whatever it is. We will publish that. So we'll publish it in the letter to say, look, this week this error occurred. It resulted in this happening. What can you do to improve? And we publish it every month. We publish these errors. I mean, thankfully, it's not every single month that there's an error that occurs.
I think that's amazing. Noting. No, look, to cut you off, because one of the things we're going to be kind of in the redemption story of how to rebuild trust is like publishing errors and definitely publishing what's been learnt. So that's exactly lines to kind of what that is.
The main reason that this was started was because I wanted to make it clear to the wider business that compliance is not perfect. Yeah. Don't expect perfection from us because we're human and we use systems that can fail. We're not perfect. We try to be, we'll do our best to be because we don't want to put anyone at risk. We don't want the company to lose money. But here's an example of how human we are, because I wanted to break down barriers of people seeing compliance as these outsiders and these gatekeepers that are perfect. So this newsletter basically just publishes errors for the business. So originally it was meant to be within the compliance team, just so we could all learn. But then we put it to the wider business. Let's show them that errors have occurred. And do I think that it's a great tool? There will people that will listen to this and go, no, you shouldn't do that. You don't want people to know that these errors have occurred. I find it useful, and I'll take feedback on it, on whether it's effective or not. But I find it useful. My teams find it useful. So I think that's a good way of rebuilding trust, rebuilding confidence. That's a good way. Another way that I found useful, I always say that one of my probably pitfalls is that I'm quite outspoken. I don't mind calling out senior managers, senior leaders when they're making mistakes as well. But I expect the same from my team members. Call me out and help me improve, help me develop. Because if you don't tell me when I've made a mistake and I'm not aware I've made that mistake, it's going to happen again. So I think the fact that I will call out anybody in the business to say that, not in a horrible way, but, this was wrong and could have been done this way. Let's find a solution. Mm-hmm. And then I expect the same from my team. Yeah. And I think that rebuilds trust.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I agree. So trying to answer this question myself in a two-pronged approach. So I think one of the common mistakes, compliance mistakes, is inflexibility And also another common mistake is there's only one way to be compliant.
You mean like doing yoga?
So inflexibility of approach. So I think that means that often compliance in the past, less so now, but still to a degree, is like a bus. It's very slow moving. It's very slow to transition and change, and then that's a mistake because often you cannot be flexible to what the needs of the business or the regulatory environment is, and then that is probably a lot of the time what leads to kind of regulatory action because the regulators see this as being not being fit for purpose, and so being able to how you build trust in that is showing how the compliance or how you as a business has become more flexible, more agile to the regulatory environment, and then most importantly, being able to evidence change. I think the most important things about of how to rebuild trust internally, especially if you're from a senior management and board level, is showing that you have understood and that you've become more flexible, and then you become more agile, and then being able to evidence how you delivered that change. And I think those things is what helps rebuild trust internally, whether it's to the compliance, whether it's to other areas of the business, or whether it's to regulatory external bodies. So I think those are really, really important things. And I think that often a common mistake with compliance still to this day is inflexibility, and there's one way or the highway, or our way and the highway.
A question on something you just said there. Do you think that being open and transparent, let's say you're in a regulatory audit, being open and transparent with a regulator can help? If I say open and you've got to be open and transparent with a regulator, but being forthcoming about a mistake, do you think that can help by showing human and vulnerability to a regulator?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, 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 very difficult, right? I've been in countless audits, over a dozen audits over the last 10 years, and they've changed over time. So the impact of your transparency and the impact of your vulnerability has also shifted. But I think it's always best to be as honest as you can be and as transparent as you can be where possible. Now, I think what's important again is going back to the mistake. So where you can own up to a mistake or own up to an area of operations or compliance which hasn't delivered the best outcome in its efficiency or in its in the spirit of what the specific regulation is, but however it hasn't caused a mistake in terms of being able to still adhere to the regulation, then yes.
I'm not talking about that because obviously if you have committed a regulatory breach, you have to be forthcoming.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about a breach. I'm talking about any type of error that's occurred. So not a breach, but you didn't review a customer in X amount of time and it resulted in something negative. Not a breach, but negative. Do you think that being forthcoming with a regulator can help? Let me word it differently.
No, so I can answer the question. I think 100% yes. I think what regulators...
Do you not then think, so just quickly on that, do you not then think that would then make them question your competence?
No, so I think what regulators appreciate is openness and again, a flexibility of actually... of potentially adapting based on expectations. So what I often do in a regulatory environment is saying this is what we do to ensure compliance for that regulation, for that process, for that requirement, obligation. This is what we do, and then get feedback. We don't think this is great. Okay, look, we'll be willing to hear feedback from you as a regulator of what you've seen other operators do as best practice. So then that straight away shows that a commitment to actually we want to improve. And when you do that, even if it's inefficient, now you've moved the focus from actually it being inefficient to where you can build efficiency into that. And I think that definitely is, if you can focus on that within any sort of regulatory assessment or any sort of liaison and discussions with the regulation, with regulators, that is always a good starting point. Rather than saying, no, we haven't made a mistake, we've done it. Yeah. It's like, this is always a good starting point.
No, I like that. I agree 100%. So look, we're going to wrap up. Conclusion. Any final statement, comment before we close it off?
Yeah, I think one thing I'll kind of try to leave as a closing statement is when it comes to mistakes and overcoming them, is turning mistakes from a mistake into mastery. How did that focusing on how can that mistake allow you to master your craft, master your department, master management, master whatever it is, whether it's a life mistake, whether it's a career mistake, or where we focus on specifically compliance. How can that mistake allow you to get close to mastering it?
I like that. We've got to leave that there.
Closing statement, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a really good closing statement. You want to wrap it up? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that
Listen,
nonsense.
guys, I think, again, this has been definitely more of a kind of a discussion episode, but I think it's been good because the focus has been on actually action, not just like on a soapbox. We've actually tried to deliver what we do that helps us to overcome mistakes and hopefully helps others to overcome mistakes as well, which is, I think, what's most important about this episode. So, again, the time's flown today. Thank you guys for listening. We hope you've taken some key points that you can implement again into life, career, or if you work in compliance, in your role in compliance, that will help you to understand where mistakes are and most importantly be able to overcome them and develop and build from them. So thank you again. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, engage with our content. And one thing that we have been asking and continue to ask you to do is, if there are any topics that you want to discuss, I've seen a few people in comments actually, give us some feedback on episodes they've enjoyed the most. But again, if there's some future episodes that you'd like to hear us discuss, please make sure you inbox us or you comment us, and we will definitely try to get that to you guys. Thank you again, guys. Bye.